But if you're looking for, I suppose, the optimistic side of it, there was a wonderful story came out in Fiorentina with their winning their game, uh, winning 1-0 against Torino with a goal from Luca Ranieri. And the reason that this felt so analogous to me is that Luca Ranieri is a product of the Fiorentina youth system, who was more or less on his way out of the club. It seemed like he'd been there for 5 years, I think, as a youth player, and then he went on and was sent on loan for his first four full seasons as a senior player. Last season, they kept him around, didn't send him on loan, specifically because of UEFA's homegrown player rule. They found themselves in a situation where they were going into the Europa Conference League. They had the option to have a 25-player list for the Conference League, and Ranieri fit the bill, and they didn't have other players who fit the bill, and here's another body, and it's better to have the body than to not. Ranieri played, I think it was, I couldn't say he only played, he started 6 games in the Conference League, almost all of them in the knockout round. He went from being this peripheral figure to being someone who worked his way into the first team, started games at the end of last season for them, and now has become a starter in their Serie A team as well. He started games regularly for them this season. He scored 4 goals in all competitions, including this winner against Torino. He's sort of this, at 24 years old, this embodiment of, well, actually, what if instead of buying foreigners for everything, we look to our youth systems and maybe put some extra energy into these players? We might find some rewards. But Fiorentina are also a great story in their own right, because they are 4th in the table right now. And frankly, I don't know if I can give you good reasons how they're doing it beyond Vincenzo Italiano, because the squad was already, I would say, performing at its level in the last couple of seasons to finish 7th and 8th, to go to the Conference League final. It was pushing itself very hard, did go to Coppa Italia final last season as well. Then you take out Sofian Amrabat in the summer, and this season, they said goodbye to Jovic, they said goodbye to Cabral as well, which perhaps those aren't big losses because the attack wasn't really working, but they go out and sign Lucas Beltran, bring in Nzola. Those two also not scoring goals for them, so they still haven't found a solution up front to the selling of Dusan Vlahovic 2 years ago. And yet, here they are 4th in the table, defying gravity, with their top scorer, Nico Gonzalez, injured and still winning 3 games without him. They are an extraordinary story. Not always extraordinary football. If anything, I would say the football has been less and less extraordinary in recent weeks for what Italiano would like. But results are results, and they're getting them right now. I don't know if you guys have enjoyed watching that as much as I have, just seeing Italiano find ways to keep that team winning.
I like the rise of Luca Ranieri. I think you make a very good point there, sort of the poster boy for what a player can achieve if a club is patient with them. And we know that Italian clubs can often send players out on what seems like an interminable number of loans. I mean, I don't think Roberto Piccoli will ever play regularly for Atalanta, but I think he's on his 6th different loan spell away from Atalanta. He actually missed a chance for them against them for Lecce the other day. But Luca Ranieri, if memory serves, was part of the 2019 Italy U20 squad. He's from the 99 generation, which is a really good generation. Scamacca, Fratesi, Bastoni, albeit he wasn't in that squad because he was already very established by then. Donnarumma's a 99, obviously he wasn't in that squad. But Carnesecchi, who's a 2000, played in that team. Luca Ranieri was in it, Luca Pellegrini as well, so much so that Luca Pellegrini was being played as a number 8. His career hasn't really developed at all. But I like what I've seen from Luca Ranieri, and he's also shown how versatile he can be as well, because he was initially a left wing back. We've seen him play as a left centre back as part of a 3. We've seen him play as a left centre back as part of a 4, and clearly has an eye for goal, as you said. And I think what Fiorentina are doing this season is very different to what we've seen previously for them under Italiano, namely where they were a bit gung ho and they would score goals, but for every time they would, I still, for me, the sort of the Fiorentina under Italiano game par excellence was when they lost 4-3 at the Franchi to Inter, and Mkhitaryan scored in like the 95th minute. They were 3-3 against Inter, and they were still chasing the winner, and they ended up getting caught. It was about 4-on-1 on the counter attack, and Mkhitaryan scored. And I think they've become a lot cuter now. I think their progress in Europe has helped them in terms of coming up against different types of opposition. It's Italian football. If you can defend well and keep clean sheets, I mean, this is true of any league, but, we mentioned it off air before on the pod. I mean, Terracciano seems to now actually be producing consistently, which wasn't always the case. And they're not conceding goals. I think one in December, all told, I think, Mina, you said it was 4 clean sheets in 5. And that's a huge platform upon which to build, especially as you said, Nico Gonzalez is your top scorer. He plays on right wing as part of a 4-3-3. And you haven't really been able to replace Vlahovic. It didn't work out with Artur Cabral, who's now gone on to Benfica. It didn't work out with Luka Jovic. And it hasn't really worked out so far with Beltran or Enzola. So you have to find a way to win. And if your strikers aren't scoring and your top scorer is injured, the best way to win is by not conceding and then trying to nick a goal, which is exactly what they did. You know, you've got a defender forward who scores, I think it was the 85th minute, wasn't it, when they got the winner. And that's a huge difference between 1 point and 3.
I think also it's. I mean, I'm very impressed with Fiorentina and actually trying to see how they can switch themselves, move to a 3-man back line if it means securing the result. But I think it's also like, I was really impressed. So I started looking at their record. And if we look at the last, the clean sheets, they've been against Torino, Monza, Verona, Salernitana. And the goal in the game in which they did concede, because it's 4 out of 5, was Roma. So I do think that it's they're very terrible teams to go up against, who probably also have the same problems that you do. So I don't know how much to read into that, because, when they have come up, obviously they had a dreadful performance against Empoli, who beat them 2-0, lost to Lazio 1-0, lost to, did they lose to Bologna? No, they didn't. They lost to Milan. So I think that I don't know. I think there's still a lot that I would still need to see about Fiorentina at the moment in time. I'm not sure how far that they are going to go. I think that they're good at beating the teams that they should beat. It's about the other teams that I'm interested to see where they get to, because it is a problem that they don't have a forward. I think it's a huge problem for them, and I think they're finding solutions to at least keep the back door closed, which is something that's been a problem for them. But I would need to see how they develop, because I'm not yet convinced that this is. I think there's always going to be progress against when it comes to Italiano teams, because last year at this point they had, I think, 23 points, and now they're on 33. But I have to see.
Yeah, I certainly don't personally think they're going to finish in the top 4 this season. Obviously, there's so much unknown. We're going into the January transfer window. Also, haven't mentioned yet, we're about to have the Africa Cup of Nations, and Fiorentina, like many teams, are going to lose players the Africa Cup of Nations. So a slightly interesting situation there, actually, because I think it's Nzola actually is saying he doesn't necessarily want to go to the Africa Cup of Nations and is trying to resist his call-up to go and play for Angola, perhaps because he's trying to establish himself more successfully at Fiorentina, and yet to be determined how that gets resolved, because you're supposed to respond to international call-ups under the agreements the clubs have with FIFA. They don't want clubs interfering with that dynamic, and that's where the will of the player will come into things. But I think just worth flagging up how well they're doing right now. I do share your concerns for them, Mina. I think the squad is ultimately quite limited. And look, even Ranieri, I'm hugely enthusiastic about what he's doing. I've seen people saying, he needs to get into the Italy team. And I was thinking, well, centre-back is not actually a position where I'm too worried about Italy just yet. I think he's still got plenty of football he needs to play and get into his legs. And the counterpoint of what Patrick was saying about him being a very versatile player, which he is, I'm not certain he's a well-rounded centre-back yet. I think he's got really interesting willingness to jump on passes and to step out, but he hasn't got that physical strength. And how much is that going to affect him playing in different types of backlines? I don't know. I'm not trying to drag him down, having just built him up. I'm just saying that we can praise things without saying not everything is immediately at the level of perfection, which I think is a fair way to reflect on Fiorentina at the moment. But whichever way you cut it, 4th in the table is hugely impressive by Vincenzo Italiano with the resources he's got there.